happening, everyone? This is Zach Edwards for another episode of the Adventure Box podcast. That's right. This is where we actually talk about everything history. This month, we are talking about Mondays and Wednesdays. We're talking about the colonial life, the colonies of America. When it comes to Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're going to be talking about Egypt and everything there. I mean, Egypt is one of the most fascinating places in the world when it comes to history. Why? Because it's almost the center of the known world at that time. Okay, it's also the biggest part of trade and everything else. Okay, I'm not going to go too much into it, but I found out some mind-blowing things, and I shared them last time, and we're going to talk about some new mind-blowing things this Thursday as well. But with that, thank you so much for joining us. This is put together by Historical Conquest. Historical Conquest is not a curriculum per se. It is a game. It is basically helping students to learn history in all seven, we'll say seven right there, 7 learning styles. Everything from kinesthetics, oral, verbal, and so on and so forth. I can't do it offline when I'm under this pressure and under the time crunch. So, but we try to make it. That's why we have the Adventure Box. The Adventure Box is great because it gives you everything you need for a month worth of curriculum, including more of the game, expansion decks, a curriculum. I mean, it's like 400 pages for the curriculum, but you don't have to read 400 pages. We don't want you to read 400 pages, but we give you everything you might need. Coloring pages, timelines, we give you activities, we give you vocabulary, we give you cross-curricular things, everything that you as a student might want to know in the text, and parents and teachers, everything you might want to do for the education. Okay, so that being said, let's get into today, where we are now talking about the Swedish. And why do I have that little thing up? I have no idea where they came from. Huh, look at that. Okay, so now we're in to New Sweden. Why is Sweden so important? I mean, I have never heard of a settlement established by the Swedish. Okay, that's actually not true. So, I mean, it might be that you haven't heard about it, but they did do a lot. And so they were actually, well, today we're going to be talking about they are the smallest on the East Coast. And then on the West Coast, we also have Russia that we're going to be going over as well. So let's go over the Swedish. How did they come to find the New World? Well, the first thing, they came to find the New World because they got jealous of everyone else exploring the New World. They wanted to come over and find out what this place was all about. So they started sending over, and they heard about it from the Dutch. They heard about it from the English. They heard it from the Spanish, the Portuguese, the French. Everyone was over here, except for the Swedish. I think there was a little bit of jealousy. So they said, you know what? We are going to go over there and we're going to establish our own settlement like everyone else. We want to be like everyone else. Okay. But they didn't want to be like everyone else because they wanted to do it their own way. Okay. So 1637. Remember, this is after New Amsterdam's are already established, 1625. This is 12 years after that flourishing, sometimes flourishing, sometimes not, settlement had started. So the Swedish are hearing this from everyone. Everyone's over. Man, it's like you're going to you want to go to a party. You have this group of friends. Everyone's at this party and you're not invited. Why? Well, they don't want to share with you. I mean, they're getting all this great stuff from the New World. They don't want to share with you. And you might hear about it. They're like, no, you don't want to come over here. Please don't come over here. The Swedish finally say, let's go over there. Yeah, let's find out what the party's about. Yeah, let's go. Let's do it. Okay. So they send someone over. They form the New Sweden Company. These are so unique. I mean, seriously. You have the Dutch East India Company. You have the Dutch West India Company. You have the English East India Company. You have the Dutch East India Company. Okay. Not exactly. That's a longer story. But you have all these different companies coming over from Europe. So they said, hey, let's create our own. And we'll be very unique. And we'll just say New Sweden Company. That's right. Because we're going to send them over and they're going to establish a new land. Okay. So they send over led by Swedish Chancellor Axel Oxenstierna. Yes, that's his name. That's exactly his name. Remember it. Print it. That's great. Whatever I said. Yeah, okay. With a Dutchman. Actually, Peter Minuit had already been over to the New World. So they said, let's hire someone that's already been there and let's give him some ships. So they send them over. So he goes over his first expedition, leads the expedition with 2 ships. These are the Kalmar Nickel and the Fogelgrip, and send them over to the New World. And they found Fort Christina. Okay, so let me show you the map. Again, this is New York and the Hudson River, which is where most of the Dutch settled. But you also have down here, going up the Delaware River, where you have Fort Nassau. Well, guess where the Dutch ran up? Well, they didn't go there, luckily, because that would have been a lot more people. They come down here, and there's not that much there. Let's do it. So the Dutch East India Company is the one that controls Fort Nassau. And they attack and fight and such, and nothing really comes of it because they settle. They settle right here in this area, near the Baltimore area. And they establish, where they establish? Let's see. Where is... Why does that not actually show up in this map? Okay. Well, the Delaware River. Going up the Delaware River. Or is this the Delaware River? That's the Delaware River. Sorry. Up here. Whew. I should learn geography again. Whew. I needed a better... Did you know where the Delaware River was? Because I just found out. It was actually above where I thought it was. So, this Wilmington area up to Philadelphia, going into Pennsylvania and such. The eastern side of the Delaware River was where Fort Nassau was. The Swedish set up on the west side of it. So they started establishing Fort Christina. Now let me show you a picture of Fort Christina. Okay. Okay, you can't. That's a horrible picture. Actually, you know what? Let's zoom into this. This is more authentic of the pictures. And they're all in Dutch. Look at that. Oh, never mind. Or Swedish, sorry. Let's go to the next one. Okay, here we go. So you have Fort Nassau. It's right over here, right at the tip of the Delaware River. Okay, well, tip as it like starts to get narrower, basically. And then these are all Swedish settlements. So the Swedish come in and set up all these settlements. So Fort Christina, right here. So they set up Fort Christina. It's on the east side, or sorry, the west side of the Delaware River. So they established this in, again, 1638 with Peter Minuit. So they established this. It's in basically Wilmington, Delaware. And they named it after the Swedish Queen, Christina. There you go. Everyone's so unique. I mean, totally unique. They come up with all their own names. Okay, but they started fur trading. Again, on the west side, you have a lot more fur trading than you do on the east side, where Fort Nassau is. Okay, so let's continue. So they established New Sweden, basically between 1643, after more settlers come in, and 1644. This is the expansion of New Sweden territory. And they continue to work with the Native Americans, fur trading. Now, when you're a fur trader, you do not want to make the indigenous angry. Because if you're fur trading, they're going to get you most of your furs. You can go out, send people out and go hunting. They might come up with nothing. But if you get a whole village of indigenous and they already have furs to trade you, you might as well trade. And usually it's not that expensive because they want what you have, beads and glass and other things that made industrially. And they have what you want, furs. So you trade, and it is a good trade because you're both happy at the end. People these days love to say, that was horrible that they gave him beads, which were worthless. It shouldn't be. Well, for one thing, beads were not worthless. They actually took a long time to actually make because they were glass. And glass, you had to blow them. And so you actually had to make them, each one of them. They were not manufactured at the time. You might have been made, some may be made out of clay and other things. But these were the parts these are the things that they were selling or giving to the indigenous who did not have those things. Or if they did, they had a very crude sense of them. And so they traded with it because it was value. So a US dollar, what does it actually mean? Nothing. It's a piece of paper. It's literally a piece of paper. But what does it have behind it? It has a value that you actually put on that paper. So if I give you a loaf of bread for $3, I see the value of my bread being $3. You see the value of your dollars being one loaf. And so you trade. The Native Americans at that time, they saw my one thing of fur, which I've got hundreds of them, and I'm going to go get more, to me is worth a bag full of beads. So if I've got a person that's Swedish and wants to trade me for a bag full of beads, I'm there for you. Totally. Give it to me. And we will trade because the value is equal. And that's how they were able to do it. And they worked actually together. Now, they did actually set up different forts to create this kind of structure in this land that was actually keeping them secure from the Dutch or from the English and such. So that is why these forts were so necessary. And in those, they would also trade the Native Americans for whatever the Native Americans saw for value in order to get these lands. Now, sometimes they actually just settled and worked with the Native Americans. But again, if you were fur trading, you did not want to make the indigenous angry with you. So you did not steal land. You did not steal anything from them. You did things with understanding and by talking things through. People these days, they don't talk enough. Now, you hear plenty of podcasts and people talking nonstop on YouTube. They can't stop themselves from talking. But I'm talking conversing with others. If I'm talking to a microphone, hopefully I'm talking to you, but there's still no conversion. There's no conversation. These days, we are starting to isolate ourselves. And in those days, they actually had to work together. So that's a life lesson you can learn. If you really want something is of value to you, you can trade it money because people see the value of money, or you can trade it other things, including creating a relationship with someone. And creating that relationship with someone, an actual relationship, not just I'm going to create this relationship because I want to get something from you. Creating an actual relationship will get you so much more than you ever would have. Okay, but I'm going away from what I'm supposed to be doing. Okay, so let's go back to this. So between the years of 1647, again, they've been here for about 10 years. They are actually starting to have controversy with the Dutch. And the Dutch decide, you know what? We're not going to have these Swedish come here anymore. So we're going to attack them. We're going to make things hard for them. We're going to threaten them. So the Swedish said, well, you're going to threaten us. We're going to build some more forts. So they built more forts. And they started getting new governors to come in and basically defend this land, bring in new people and such. So by 1654, what happens? Well, reinforcements arrive from Sweden. Well, they come and they arrive, and things are okay, and they have control over the area. But what happens? Rising tensions occur, and they capture the Dutch fort of Casimir. It's modern day Newcastle in Delaware. And they take it from the Dutch. Now, again, they're both making these, and I'm trying to find, it's not on this map. Oh, yeah, it is. So there's Christina, and just below it is Casimir. And this is a Dutch settlement. So they take that over. The Dutch aren't very happy with that. It's like, hey, we were threatening, but we weren't doing anything. And so they basically respond. So this is when it actually starts becoming a fight. The Dutch basically in 1 year, 1655, remember 1654, they took over Newcastle or Casimir. 1655, the Dutch attack and just wipe them out. Just like the whole gone. They're all like, you're out of here. get out. You attack one of our forts, we're going to take all of yours. So the Dutch reclaim control of Kashmir, but then start attacking other ones and assaulting New Sweden. And the Swedish are outnumbered, and Fort Christina and the other settlements all fall to the Dutch. And that ends New Sweden. Great. That ends New Sweden. Seriously? That was a lame, very short, okay, I'll say it. Lame story. Holy cow, they didn't put up much of a fight. They weren't there. Well, come to find out, well, a few years later, less than 10 years later, the English came in and conquered the Dutch. You want lame? There you go. You got lame. The Dutch didn't stand a chance against the English either. So, yeah, you pick a fight, you don't find friends, and then a bigger bully comes around and you get taken out. So, sorry, that's just how it is. So, yeah, that's it. Okay, so let's tell you a little bit about these forts. So, Fort Christina is actually out on somewhat of a peninsula. Look, it has the exact same style as the Dutch. The four corners of a square all having diamonds, because it was the best way to defend. So this is Fort Christina. And you can see behind Fort Christina is the land that they were defending, the settlement that they were defending. Then you have Fort, and I'm going to butcher this name, I always do. Oh, it won't let me zoom in. What the hey? Why not? So this is an island that the Swedish set up in order to keep their lands safe. Again, if you're on an island, you can attack from all sides if there's ships that are trying to come in. And you can't get attacked by land, so the water is basically the best way of doing it. Someone would literally have to crash their boat into the land in order to jump off and attack, unless they just riddled you with cannonballs until you submit. And that's basically what have to happen. So this is Fort Naya Gothenburg. N-Y-A. I'm not quite sure how you spell that or pronounce that. But that was another one that was taken over. Okay, so now we're going to jump. We're going to jump way into the future. Not too much in the future, but well enough into the future, and also to the other side of the continent. So this is no longer the east coast of the New World or America. This is the west coast of America. Yeah, that's right. This is also about 100 years later. So this is when the English have already taken over, or are taking over, the east coast from the French and from everyone else. So without them knowing, the Russians say, hey, there's a new land out there. Our fishermen have seen this land forever, and they fished off this land. Why haven't we gone over there? Everyone else is going over there. Now, Russia has all this information because they're actually part of Europe. It's like a Eurasia relationship. They're in Asia, but they're part of Europe, somewhat. I've never really understood that relationship 100%. So again, it also depends on who you talk to. As a historian, it's not really the same. Okay, so let's go into 1728. Again, around the time of the French and Indian War, so well after colonial life. But we're doing this because they're actual settlements in the New World, and it's a country that basically put their settlements here. They're the only ones that came over to the West Coast that were not Europe. Okay, so 1728, you have Vitus Bering's, his first expedition. He goes up to what we now call the Bering Straits. Vitus is his first name, Bering's is his second name. That's between Siberia and Alaska. So he sails a ship up here and finds land, and look at that, it's his first expedition. Interesting enough, now here's one that's really interesting. Was he Russian? No. No, he was not. Vitus Bering was actually Danish. Yeah. So he was part of the Danes. He was an explorer commissioned by the Russian Tsar Peter the Great to set sail, because it's a Dutch. We don't care if he dies. And we're the Russians. Russians are so much better. We're not going to put our own people to die in the water. Let's send this Danish explorer out. And he's like, yes, please. Yeah, please send me. And so they said, yeah, sure, why not? Send him out. So they send him out, and he does not reach North America, but he reaches basically the tip of where the Bering Straits would be. Actually, no, he doesn't. He explores the east side of Russia, but doesn't make it that far. He establishes a route to the northern Pacific, paving the way. So yeah, he sets sail from Kamchatka and explores the Siberian coast. Yeah, but does not reach North America for this first one. But he paves the way for this northern passage. Okay, so 1741. That's a long, long wait. That's 13 years later. Well, Bering's is allowed to explore again. So he leads a second expedition and explores into the Alaska coast and the Aleutian Islands, reaching the coast near present-day Alaska. So he goes across into the Aleutian Islands, which are, if you're looking at Alaska, you have the panhandle to the eastern side or the right side, and then you have this other what looks like a panhandle or like a tail that comes off Alaska. That's called the Aleutian Islands. When I was working for the Department of Fish and Game for Alaska, I traveled those islands because we had different fish and game establishments out there. So we had offices, we had fish weirs and places where people would count them. All these different things that were established on this island or on these islands. And so Bering came up this point and he reaches the coast near present-day Alaska, confirming the existence of the landmass to the east. Now, why didn't they know that? Well, for one thing, they didn't care to explore the coast of Siberia up to Alaska. So Bering dies on the return voyage, but his expedition spurs Russian interest in that area. That is 1741. Again, another long wait. This time, around 19 years later. Arrival of the first Russian fur traders. Why in the world would it take that long? Do your own research. Check it out. I actually don't remember. I could ask it. You want me to ask it? Let's ask it. Okay, so why did it take, let's see, why did it take Russians 19 or more years after Bering, and you could do this too, type into Google any of your questions, find the different sources that they have. As of right now, it'll give you an AI, which will give you some history, but do your own research. Sometimes the AI is not correct. I've used AI to help me with curriculum and answering questions and such, but you really have to fact check the history. So just to let you know. Okay, so 19 or more years after Bering's discovered Alaska. Why did it take Russians 19 or more years after Bering's discovered Alaska to send their first fur traders? It might have been a regime change. You never know. It might have been something else. So delayed nearly 20 years for Russian traders for the following reasons. Okay, lack of immediate interest or resources. That makes all the sense right there. Done. You don't need 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5. You don't need the other ones. That makes complete sense. So no interest or less interest, less resources. What else? Okay, logistics challenges in difficult terrains. Okay, so Alaska, during a lot of the year, some of the year, it's very difficult. Again, I lived up there. It wasn't that difficult, at least from what I saw. But on the the western side of Alaska, there are a lot of places that are like swamps during the summer and frozen over during the winter. So that could be part of it. If you get down into Anchorage, even Kodiak, down into the southeast Alaska, the Panhandle, you're gonna get a lot more trees and a lot more fur traders' interests there. Okay, Slow development of a Russian-American company. That's another thing. Okay, so the Russians lacked a centralized company like the British or the Dutch or the Swedish, as you saw, to create a fur trade. So let me go back to the Russian history. Go back to my notes. Okay, so 1760 or so, around this time, they started to go over to the Aleutian Islands. And also, the most valuable pelts at the time were sea otter pelts. Sea otter pelts were extremely valuable. Now they use beaver skin. Now they use, well, they're going to find a whole bunch of more pelts. But sea otters is waterproof, much like the beaver would be as well. But that was more on the east coast, is where they would find the beavers, while the Alaska area would be more the sea otters. Okay, so they came over and established their first settlement on the Aleutian Islands. So they started trading down on the islands. Let me show you some of these settlements. Okay, so this is a photo of one of their, this is called Karluk, Alaska, which was one of the first Russian settlements. And this is a little bit more modern because again, it's a picture. So settlements, this would be one of the forts in Unalaska. That's right, they had one called Unalaska. All right, so they started establishing all these different forts around the Aleutian Islands as they started making their way into the mainland of Alaska. Now, remember, they only know that there's the islands. Bearings actually comes in and tells them that there's a land mass out there. So more interest. Okay, so the establishment of the first Russian colony was Kodiak Island. Kodiak is amazing. Now let me show you Kodiak Island. I'm going to bring up my map. We're going to leave the East Coast where we were, and I'm going to go home. So I was actually from Juneau, right there, where that star is. Haines, Skagway, oh, amazing places. Okay, but come out from there. Here's Anchorage, if you know Alaska at all. Anchorage is the capital. Sorry, it's not the capital. Juneau is the capital. Anchorage is the most populated city. And then if you go south of there, this is Kodiak Island. So you have a lot of different ports, Kodiak. You have these smaller areas which are settled by the Russians, but these days, not much is happening there. Old Harbor. So, Akhayak. So there's still people there, but it's not as popular. Okay, populated. Okay, so I flew a single prop pontoon plane into, I think, one of these lakes down here. Fraser Lake, that's the one. So I flew into here, and we have a fish weir where the salmon come up this river, up this big old waterfall. So what a fish weir is, it actually, because if there's like an obstacle, we're trying to put more fish in a certain lake for commercial purposes a lot of times, then we will actually create a fish ladder. And in order to get the fish over there, we have a fish weir. It's basically a dam that doesn't stop the water, it just stops the fish from going upstream. Because if they get past the weir, they're going to find themselves in this very turbulent area that they can't get up the waterfall. It's near impossible for them to jump up the waterfall. So they go up the fish ladder and they settle in this huge lake. So that was my place. I settled, I helped with a lot of these fish weirs in Kodiak area. But Kodiak itself, let me see, where are we? Kodiak. There it is. Kodiak is this very interesting thing. If you come up on the hill, you're going to see a whole bunch of wind turbines and such. Kodiak Island, again, is established by the Russians. And they established this area in 1784. So this is 10 years after their first establishment on the Aleutian Islands. And they're still creating all these other forts, but these are the major ones I'm going over. Then they formulate the first Russian-American company, which is actually called the Russian-American Company. And it is chartered by Tsar Paul I to come into Alaska and start fur trading with the Inuit up in the northern area of Alaska, and the Native American tribes on the panhandle and such. So this is what I love talking about. Russia came in and was able to sell a lot of these areas. Another place to look at is down here. Let's see, there's a lot. There's Juneau. Where's Sitka? Sitka, Sitka, Sitka. Oh, come on. It's not that small. Sitka. Maybe it was a little bit higher and I just didn't see it. There's Cake. There's Wrangell. My brother-in-law is actually from Wrangell. Worked in Petersburg a good amount. Petersburg, Russian. Petersburg. Yeah, there you go. Why can I not find Sitka? There's Hoona. Gus Davis. We actually had friends that had a fishing village out there. Oh, so there it is. Sorry, a resort out there. Gus Davis. Actually, I think that's the picture of their lodge. Okay, and then you have Sitka. So in 1808, they established Sitka as one of the first places to establish a trading post with the. It's not the Tlingit. Well, it is the Tlingit in that area, but it's also another tribe that lives more in that area. And so, look at this. This is actually a volcano in Alaska. Pretty cool, huh? Okay. So, and then you have them establishing places in Juneau and all over the place. Most of these cities, like Petersburg and such, are all Russian started. Okay, so now let's go further. Where do they go? Okay, they don't just stop in Alaska. They come down British Columbia and actually come to a place that's a little bit warmer for them. They actually quite enjoy the fact that they can come down. Let's actually put this in here. Fort Ross, California. Where is that? Oh, that doesn't help one. Zoom out. Okay, so there's Fort Ross. To let you know, let's see. There we go. There's San Francisco. There's Fort Ross. I've been there. I used to live in this area just above San Francisco when my dad was in the military. And so coming up, they established Fort Ross in 1812. So 4 years after Sitka, they sailed enough down and found a nice place they wanted to be, and they came into this area. Now, I'm missing some of these pictures I want to show you. This is, again, Fort on Alaska. This is actually a Orthodox church that's in, let's see if it says it on its sign. I don't remember exactly where it is, but they set up all these churches. Funny enough, we're not going to get to that point. We're going to come back to this picture. These are Russian seiners. These are seine fishermen, where they basically wrap a big net around a large portion of water, and then they pull it in. Sometimes they pull it in with machines, but before that point, they just pulled it in by hand and on cranks. And what they do, they trapped all the salmon, so they didn't have to use a fishing pole, but they actually brought in all the salmon to the land, and then they could harvest them from there. So, and they did this for generations. I mean, these were so... this is actually Fort Ross. So Fort Ross overlooked the ocean because they were trying to establish themselves in California. They established Fort Ross just above San Francisco. Now, San Francisco was already taken over by Spanish, and it was also considered Spanish California. So the Russians basically took part of their land that they thought was their land. I don't think they had any missions up that far, but they did have, the Russians did take over this area, again, for fur trading, for other resources. And then they created a treaty. So Russia signed a treaty with the United States in 1824. Now, this is, again, when they're trying to, the United States has already been established for a while, and they're going to try to take over basically all of North America, underneath Canada, above Mexico, and they're going to try to the Louisiana Purchase and such. So they create a treaty with the Russians in 1824 not to attack them. So the Russians were okay with this. They wanted peace in this area. They did not want to attack. They just wanted money. It was a company. So the Russian-American Treaty. Then they created the Anglo-Russian treaty, which was the Russians and British establishing boundaries near Russian America, Alaska. Would be called Alaska, and this is basically British Columbia. This is Canada. So they created this treaty to keep them in their own place. Alaska, these are your boundaries. You don't get any more. Stay. Stay where you are. Russians, just stay. And so they agreed. Let's just stay. We don't want to go against the British in Canada, and the British don't want to go against the Russians in Alaska. So 1840 comes. What happens? Well, what happens when you hunt and hunt and hunt in limited areas? Well, your animals go away. You either die or move. And so there's a huge decline in fur trading. There's also a large fur decline in the people buying the fur trade as well, because there's other economic struggles that they're having. Russia is having an economic struggle. And so they find that Alaska's not really worth it for them. They're like, no, we're done with Alaska. We don't need it. And so they say, hey, what if we could sell this to the British? British don't want it. British are fine where they are. They have other economic issues going on, especially after the 1812 War of 1812. So 1867, they say, hey, America, you're already establishing yourself all over the country, all over North America, below Canada. And we got a piece of property up here. I mean, you might want to buy it. It's so amazing. Yes. Oh, wait a second. What are we talking about? This land is amazing. You want to buy it. You want to give us money for it. Give us some money and we'll give you this piece of property and we'll sell it to you before we sell it to the British. You want it? Just winking here so you can hear my winks. Okay. Yeah. So funny enough, this was called Seward's Folly. They called this transaction Seward's Folly because they did not think it was going to be that worth it. U.S. Secretary of State William Seward was the one that negotiated with the Russians for $7.2 million. The Russians are like, hoo-hoo, we got money for this land that's completely worthless to us now. So, yeah, we went out. Perfect. And they sail home. When was oil found in Alaska? Let's see. Wait a minute. When was oil found in Alaska? Now, I know you're thinking, why not gold? Well, we're going to get there. Okay. So when was oil found in Alaska? And how much oil has been pumped out of Alaska? Question mark. Okay. So let's come on, Google. You can give it to me. Come on. What is it? Okay. Oil was first discovered in 1902. 1867 to 1902. 35 years they waited and didn't find it. Okay. So looking at gold, it says that, let's see, 18 billion barrels of oil since let's see, it was found in 1902, but the oil was actually started to be pumped. Let's see. It says that 1957, oil was discovered in Swanson River, Kenai Peninsula, marking Alaska's first commercial viable oil field. So it was found in 1902, but it wasn't until 1957 when it was actually established that there was oil fields. And then the Prudhoe Bay oil field on the northern slope was also established in 1968. But the pipeline to get the oil from the north all the way down through Alaska happened in 1977, or was finished in 1977. If you have time, go to YouTube and look some of the videos on that, the documentaries. It's very fascinating how they did all that during that long ago. But yeah, so currently 18 billion barrels of oil have gone out. Now it depends on when exactly you're counting the value of it, so we can't do that. A barrel of oil has gone from like $25 up to $120. So there's a huge flux between the two. But think of that. If it was, just say $50 per barrel times 18 billion barrels. So let's just say 20 billion barrels to date times $50. It's $1 trillion worth of oil has come out of Alaska. And that's not exactly knowing when they came out, so we can't exactly tell you an actual time. So it's over $1 trillion worth of oil has come out of just Alaska. Now, here's the other question. I know you were thinking it. When was gold discovered? Okay, so gold rush, 1847, 1848, down in California. But up in Alaska, there was actually settlers, Russian settlers, that found it in 1848 before they sold it to the United States. So they actually knew that there was gold, but probably not enough in order to make it worth it for them. So then they came up to, hey, you know what? Let's sell this property. And hey, you know what? Maybe we made a mistake later on, because then gold started coming out. The first gold discovery in Juneau, where I'm from again, 1880. 13 years after they sold it to the United States. The Klondike Gold Rush, 1896 to 1899. 1899, gold was discovered in Nome. 1902, gold was discovered in Fairbanks. As of right now, over 40 million ounces of gold has been recorded extracted from Alaska. 40 million ounces. Now, an ounce is around $2,400 per ounce. So, but it wasn't always. So let's just say it was $1,000. $1,000 times $40 million. So 40, add 3 more zeros to it, times 1,000. Okay, so that would make it 40 million. 40 billion dollars worth of oil, or worth of gold, that we know of has been extracted by that. And so, yeah, that's a lot. Yeah, since the 1800s, since 1880 until now, 40 million barrels. So we've, out of Alaska, just the resources, not even talking about the lumber, not talking about the other things that are up there, fish especially, that's like $2 trillion minimum of these things. And it's way more than that. I know it's way more than that we've gotten out of this. And that's when $1 trillion a long time ago would have been a lot more expensive, a lot more valuable than it was back then. So yes, Alaska was a colony by the Russians, and we are so grateful for them to have passed it over to us. So thank you, Russia. I appreciate all the help giving us to Alaska. Now, if you could just stop attacking Ukraine, we'd be happy, totally happy. To some extent. Just stop being a dictator, Putin, and be nice, make friends, be good. So, with that being said, I'm going to leave it with you. Have a great day. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about, tomorrow's Friday. Sorry. Yeah. So, next week, stay tuned. We're going to be talking about something, it's like the French or the, what are we going to talk about? We're talking about the French. Yes, the French in the colonies. So stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will catch you next time. Take care. Bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.